I couldn't believe my ears when my own sister Sarah chuckled and said, "We just came for the food," at my birthday party, right in front of everyone. It was meant to be a celebration of my 65 years on this earth, surrounded by loved ones. But instead, it felt like a mockery. How did it get to this point where my closest family felt like strangers in disguise? Let me take you back to a time when birthday parties meant more than just cake and candles. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, birthdays were a big deal. My mom would bake her famous apple pie, and we'd invite the entire neighborhood. Everyone gathered in our cozy living room, the aroma of cinnamon filling the air, laughter resonating through the walls. But those days seemed like a distant memory now, overshadowed by the peculiar dynamics that unfolded over the years. Every morning I'd wake up early, brew a fresh pot of coffee, and sit by the window, reminiscing about simpler times. My husband, Tom, always teased me about holding on to the past too tightly. But I find comfort in the familiar. It's a warm embrace against the cold, unpredictable nature of life. Yet, as I prepared for my recent birthday, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Sarah, who used to be my confidant, had grown distant. Our conversations reduced to small talk at family gatherings. That's when the comments started. Little jabs during family dinners, subtle enough to dismiss, but sharp enough to sting. "You always make the same old meatloaf," she'd say with a smile that felt more like a sneer. Was it jealousy? Resentment? I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But this year, as I blew out the candles, her words cut deeper than any I remember. "We just came for the food." Was that all I had become to them? A provider of meals and nothing more? This is the story of how I learned that even family ties can fray and unravel, leaving you grasping at strings of the past. If you believe that respect and love should be the foundation of any relationship, family included, then subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell. Let's delve into the twists and turns of family life, together. As I sat there, the echo of Sarah's words still ringing in my ears, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the room shift. The laughter that followed her comment wasn't the warm, joyful kind I remembered from birthdays past. It was sharp, almost cruel, as if everyone at the party had been waiting for an excuse to let out some hidden resentment. I forced a smile, my hands trembling slightly as I cut the cake, pretending I hadn't heard her. But inside, my heart was sinking, drowning in a sea of doubt and hurt. How had it come to this? How had my own sister, the one person I'd shared every secret and dream with, turned into someone who could so casually dismiss me? I glanced around the room, taking in the faces of my family. My husband, Tom, was over by the punch bowl, chatting with a few of our neighbors. He hadn't even flinched at Sarah's remark, and that stung almost as much as her words. Tom had always been the kind of man who avoided conflict, who'd rather crack a joke than confront a problem head-on. Over the years, I'd come to rely on his quiet strength, but lately, I'd noticed how he'd pull back whenever Sarah's comments got too pointed. He'd just shrug, give me that half-smile of his and say, "She doesn't mean it, Martha. You know how she is." But I didn't know how she was, not anymore. And Tom's refusal to stand up for me, to even acknowledge the hurt in my eyes, made me feel more alone than ever. The birthday cake sat on the table, a chocolate masterpiece I'd spent hours decorating with little sugar flowers, just like Mom used to do. It was more than just dessert to me. It was a symbol of the love and care I'd always poured into this family. Growing up in that small Ohio town, our family home had been the heart of every celebration. The old farmhouse, with its creaky wooden floors and chipped blue paint, was where we'd all come together. Birthdays, holidays, even random Sunday dinners. Mom would be in the kitchen, apron tied tight, rolling out dough for her apple pie while Dad strung up lights in the backyard. That house wasn't just a building. It was a feeling, a safe haven where no one was ever turned away, where love was baked into every meal and woven into every laugh. I'd inherited that house after Mom and Dad passed, and though I didn't live there anymore, I kept it as it was, a time capsule of better days. It was my tether to the past, a reminder of who we used to be as a family. But now, even that felt tainted, as if Sarah's bitterness had seeped into the very foundation. Sarah herself was leaning against the wall now, a glass of wine in her hand, smirking as she whispered something to her husband, Greg. I couldn't hear what she said, but the way Greg's eyes flicked over to me, followed by a stifled chuckle, told me it wasn't anything kind. Sarah had always been the prettier one, the more outgoing one, the one who could charm a room with a single smile. I'd never minded that growing up. I loved watching her shine. But somewhere along the line, that light in her had dimmed, replaced by something darker. I couldn't pinpoint when it started, but I remembered the first time I'd felt the sting of her words. It was at a family barbecue a few years back, when she'd made a snide comment about how I always played the martyr by hosting every event. You just love being the center of attention, don't you, Martha? She'd said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'd laughed it off then, but each jab after that felt a little sharper, a little more deliberate. Was it jealousy, I wondered? Resentment over some imagined slight? Or was there something deeper, something I'd missed all these years? I tried to shake off the thought as I passed out slices of cake, but my mind kept circling back to her behavior. There was something in the way she looked at me lately, a glint in her eye that wasn't just irritation, it was calculation, like she was biding her time, waiting for the right moment to strike. I told myself I was being paranoid, that family didn't work like that, but as I handed her a plate, her fingers brushed mine, and she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear, "Hope the cake's better than last year's." It was a small thing, barely a whisper, but it cut through me like a knife. I froze for a moment, my smile faltering, before I turned away, pretending I hadn't heard. But I had, and I knew she'd meant for me to. The party dragged on, the air thick with unspoken tension. I kept busy, refilling glasses and clearing plates, trying to distract myself from the ache in my chest. Tom stayed on the sidelines, as usual, laughing at someone's joke while I handled everything on my own. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of bitterness toward him, too. Why couldn't he see how much this hurt me? Why couldn't he, just once, step in and say something to Sarah? I knew he hated confrontation, knew he'd grown up in a house where arguments were swept under the rug, but I needed him now more than ever. Instead, he played the role of the passive bystander, letting Sarah's words slide as if they were nothing. Maybe to him, they were, but to me, they were everything. As the evening wore on, I found myself retreating to the kitchen, needing a moment to breathe. The sink was piled with dishes, and I started washing them, letting the warm water soothe my frayed nerves. That's when I heard the front door open and close, followed by the sound of familiar footsteps. It was my old friend Ellen, who'd promised to stop by after her shift at the diner. Ellen and I had known each other since high school, back when we'd sneak out to the lake on summer nights and dream about escaping our small town. She'd always been the one person I could tell anything to, the one who never judged me, even when I was at my lowest. Seeing her now, with her graying hair tied back in a messy bun and her tired but kind eyes, felt like a lifeline. "Hey, Martha," she said, pulling me into a quick hug. "Sorry I'm late. Got held up with a late table. How's the birthday girl holding up?" I tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. "Oh, same old, same old. Just family stuff." Ellen raised an eyebrow, setting her purse down on the counter. "Family stuff, huh? That sounds like code for Sarah's being a pain again. Spill it. What did she do this time?" I sighed, turning off the faucet and drying my hands on a dish towel. I didn't want to burden her with my problems, but the words tumbled out before I could stop them. "She said they only came for the food, right in front of everyone, Ellen. Like I'm just some caterer, not her sister. Not someone who spent her whole life trying to keep this family together." Ellen's face softened, but there was a flicker of anger in her eyes. "That's low, even for her. What's her deal lately? She's been on your case for years now, and it's only getting worse. You don't deserve that, Martha. You've done nothing but give to this family." "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I keep thinking maybe I did something to make her hate me. Maybe I wasn't there for her when she needed me. Or maybe she's jealous of something I don't even see. But it's like she's trying to tear me down piece by piece. And Tom, he just stands there, doesn't say a word. I feel so alone. Ellen reached over, squeezing my hand. You're not alone, okay? You've got me. And I'm not afraid to tell Sarah where she can shove her attitude if it comes to that. But seriously, have you tried talking to her? Getting to the bottom of whatever's eating at her? I shook my head. I've tried, but every time I bring up anything real, she brushes me off or turns it into a joke at my expense. I don't know how to reach her anymore. We stood there in silence for a moment, the hum of the party drifting in from the living room. Ellen's presence was a comfort, but it couldn't erase the gnawing feeling in my gut that something was wrong, really wrong. I kept thinking about the old farmhouse, about how it used to be our sanctuary. Sarah had loved that place as much as I did, or so I thought, but lately she'd made offhand comments about it, little digs about how I hoarded the past by keeping it. "Why don't you sell it, Martha?" she'd said once, her tone dripping with disdain. "It's just sitting there rotting. You could use the money." I'd brushed it off at the time, but now, replaying her words in my mind, I wondered if there was more to it. Did she want the house for herself? Was that what this was about? I didn't have time to dwell on it, though, because just then, Sarah herself appeared in the kitchen doorway, her wineglass empty and her expression unreadable. Ellen gave me a quick, reassuring nod before stepping back, pretending to busy herself with a stack of napkins. Sarah sauntered over, her movements slow and deliberate, like a cat stalking its prey. "Nice party, sis," she said, her voice laced with something I couldn't quite name. "You always did know how to throw a good spread. Too bad the company's not as impressive." I felt my stomach twist, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Thanks, Sarah. I'm glad you could make it," she smirked, leaning against the counter. "Oh, I wouldn't miss it. Free food, free drinks. Why would I? Besides, someone's got to keep things interesting around here. You're not exactly the life of the party anymore, are you?" Her words hit like a slap, and I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. Ellen shot me a look, her jaw tight, but I shook my head slightly, signaling her to stay out of it. I didn't want a scene. Not here. Not now. But Sarah wasn't done. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know, Martha, I've been thinking. That old house of Mom and Dad's. It's such a waste just sitting there. I mean, come on, you don't even use it. Why not let someone else have a turn? Someone who'd actually do something with it?" I stared at her, my heart pounding. There it was again. The house. Why was she so fixated on it? "It's not just a house, Sarah," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's our history, our memories. I'm not selling it." She rolled her eyes, letting out a short, bitter laugh. Always so sentimental. "You're stuck in the past, Martha. It's pathetic. But fine, keep your little shrine. Just don't be surprised when the rest of us move on without you." With that, she turned on her heel and walked out, leaving me standing there, my hands clenched into fists. Ellen was at my side in an instant, her voice low and furious. "What the hell was that? She's got some nerve talking to you like that. And what's with her obsession with the house? Something's up, Martha. I can feel it." I nodded, my mind racing. Ellen was right. Something was up. Sarah's words weren't just cruel. They were pointed, like she was testing me, pushing me to see how far she could go. And the way she'd brought up the house again. It wasn't random. There was a purpose behind it, a motive I couldn't yet see. But I knew one thing for sure. Whatever she was after, it wasn't just about a piece of property. It was personal. The rest of the party passed in a blur. Guests started to leave, offering half-hearted goodbyes as I forced smiles and thanked them for coming. Tom finally wandered over, loosening his tie as he surveyed the mess of plates and cups scattered around the room. "Good turnout, hun," he said, his tone casual, as if nothing had happened. "You okay? You look tired." I wanted to scream at him, to ask why he hadn't said a word when Sarah humiliated me in front of everyone. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I just nodded, my throat tight. Yeah, I'm fine. Just a long day. He patted my shoulder, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me, and headed upstairs to bed. I stayed behind, cleaning up the last of the mess, my mind replaying every interaction with Sarah. The jabs, the smirks, the comments about the house. It all added up to something. But what? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing a piece of the puzzle. Something crucial that would explain why my sister had turned against me. A few days later, I decided to drive out to the old farmhouse. I hadn't been there in a while, and after everything that had happened at the party, I needed to feel connected to something solid, something real. The drive through the Ohio countryside was quiet, the rolling fields and faded barns a stark contrast to the chaos in my head. When I pulled up to the house, I felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with sadness. The paint was peeling even more now, the porch sagging under the weight of time. But it was still home. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar creak of the floorboards greeting me like an old friend. I wandered through the rooms, running my fingers over the dusty furniture, each piece tied to a memory. The dining table where we'd had so many birthday dinners, the rocking chair where Mom used to read to us, the faded curtains Dad had hung with such pride. This place was more than just walls and a roof. It was the heart of our family, the one thing that hadn't changed even as everything else fell apart. I couldn't imagine letting it go, no matter what Sarah said. As I stood in the kitchen, looking out the window at the overgrown backyard, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Sarah. My stomach dropped as I opened it, expecting another jab or insult. But what I read was worse. Hey Martha, we need to talk about the house. I've got some ideas. Meet me at Mom and Dad's place tomorrow. Don't make me come find you. I stared at the message, my hands shaking. Ideas? What did that mean? And why did she want to meet here, of all places? A chill ran down my spine as I realized this wasn't just about a casual conversation. Sarah was up to something, and I had a sinking feeling I was about to find out what. The next day, I arrived at the farmhouse early, my nerves on edge. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with possibilities, each worse than the last. When Sarah pulled up in her sleek SUV, I watched her through the window, noting the determined set of her jaw as she got out. She didn't knock, just let herself in, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Morning, sis," she said, her tone deceptively light. "Thanks for meeting me. I figured this was the best place to have this chat. You know, where it all started." I crossed my arms, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's this about, Sarah? What do you want with the house?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Straight to the point, huh? Fine, I'll cut to the chase. I think it's time we sold this place. Split the profits. It's only fair, don't you think? I mean, you've had your turn playing keeper of the family legacy. Now it's mine." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Sell it? Are you serious? This isn't just some investment, Sarah. This is our home, our history. Mom and Dad left it to me to take care of, not to sell off for a quick buck." Her smile vanished, replaced by a cold, hard stare. "Oh, come off it, Martha. You act like you're the only one who matters, like you're the only one who gets to decide what's best for this family. I've got plans, okay? Big plans. And I'm not letting some sentimental nonsense stand in my way. You've been holding on to this dump for too long, playing the perfect daughter while the rest of us scramble. I deserve a piece of this, and I'm going to get it, whether you like it or not." Her words hit me like a punch, each one laced with a venom I'd never heard from her before. This wasn't just about the house. This was about something deeper, something personal. I could see it in her eyes. Resentment? Yes, but also greed. She didn't just want the money. She wanted to take something from me, to strip away the one thing I held dear. And in that moment, I realized the truth. My sister, the person I'd loved and trusted most in the world, didn't just dislike me. She wanted to destroy me. "Sarah," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "How can you say that? After everything we've been through, After all the memories we've made here, you'd throw it all away for what? A paycheck? I thought we were better than this. I thought you were better than this." She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed through the empty house. "Better than this? Oh, Martha, you're so naive. This isn't about memories. It's about survival. And I'm done playing second fiddle to you. You've had your turn in the spotlight, hogging all the attention, all the love. Now it's mine. So here's the deal. You can sign over your share of the house willingly, or I'll find a way to take it. Trust me, I've got people who can make that happen. You're not as untouchable as you think." I stood there, stunned, as her words sank in. This wasn't just a disagreement. It was a declaration of war. My own sister was threatening me, using the one thing I cherished most as a weapon. I felt tears prick at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I straightened my shoulders, meeting her gaze head-on. "You'll never take this house from me, Sarah," I said, my voice low and firm. "Not now, not ever. If you think you can bully me into giving up our family's legacy, you've got another thing coming. Get out. Now." For a moment, she looked taken aback, as if she hadn't expected me to fight back. But then her smirk returned, colder than ever. "Fine. Have it your way. But this isn't over, Martha. Not by a long shot. You'll regret this." With that, she turned and walked out, the door slamming behind her. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my heart pounding in my chest. The house, once a place of warmth and safety, now felt like a battleground. And I knew deep down that this was only the beginning. Sarah wasn't just my sister anymore. She was my enemy. And if I wanted to protect what mattered most, I'd have to fight for it, harder than I ever had before. I stood in the empty farmhouse, the echo of the slamming door still reverberating through the air. Sarah's parting words hung heavy around me, a dark cloud of threat and betrayal. "This isn't over, Martha. Not by a long shot. You'll regret this." My hands were still clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms as I tried to steady my breathing. The house, once my sanctuary, felt like it was closing in on me, the creaking walls and dusty air suffocating. I couldn't believe it had come to this. My own sister, the person I'd grown up with, shared every childhood memory with, was now my enemy. And not just any enemy, but one who was willing to tear down everything I held dear just to get what she wanted. I walked over to the kitchen window, staring out at the overgrown backyard where we used to play as kids. I could almost see us there, Sarah and me, racing through the tall grass, laughing as we chased fireflies on summer nights. How had we gone from that to this? How had love turned into resentment, into something so cold and calculating? I replayed her words in my mind, dissecting every syllable. "I've got plans, okay? Big plans. And I'm not letting some sentimental nonsense stand in my way." Plans. What plans? Selling the house wasn't just about money. I could see that now. There was something more, something personal driving her. She wanted to hurt me, to take away the one thing that tied me to our past, to Mom and Dad, to the family we used to be. And I couldn't let her. I spent the rest of the day at the farmhouse, unable to bring myself to leave. I dusted off the old furniture, swept the floors, and even pulled a few weeds from the garden out back, as if tidying up the place could somehow fix the mess my life had become. But no amount of cleaning could erase the dread settling in my chest. Sarah wasn't bluffing. She'd meant every word of her threat, and I knew she'd be back. I just didn't know when or how. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the living room, I locked up the house and drove home, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if she tried to force a sale behind my back? What if she had some legal trick up her sleeve? I didn't know much about property law, but I knew enough to understand that inheritance disputes could get ugly fast. And Sarah, with her charm and determination, could probably convince a lawyer or two to take her side. When I got home, Tom was in the living room, sprawled out on the couch with a beer in his hand, watching some late-night talk show. He barely looked up as I walked in, just mumbled a half-hearted, "Hey, hun, how was your day?" I stood there for a moment, staring at him, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I wanted to scream, to shake him out of his complacency and make him see how serious this was. But I knew it was pointless. Tom had never been one for conflict, and after years of marriage, I'd learned that pushing him to take a stand only made him retreat further. Still, I couldn't help myself. I needed someone in my corner, even if I knew deep down I was on my own. "Tom," I said, my voice tight as I sat down on the arm of the couch. "I need to talk to you about something. It's important." He finally glanced over, his brow furrowing slightly. "What's up? You look like you've seen a ghost." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "It's Sarah. She came to the farmhouse today. She wants to sell it. Split the profits," she said. "But it's not just that. She threatened me, Tom. She said if I don't agree, she'll find a way to take it from me. She's serious." I could see it in her eyes. Tom sat up a little, setting his beer down on the coffee table, but his expression didn't change much. "Sell the house? That old place? I mean, I get why you're attached to it, Martha. But maybe she's got a point. It's just sitting there costing you money and upkeep. Why not let it go?" I stared at him, incredulous. "Let it go? Tom, that house isn't just a building. It's Mom and Dad. It's our family. It's everything I've been fighting to hold on to. And Sarah doesn't just want the money. She wants to hurt me. She's trying to take it away from me out of spite. How can you not see that?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, avoiding my gaze. "Look, I don't know what's going on between you two, and I don't really want to get in the middle of it. Sarah's always been a little sharp, you know? But she's your sister. I'm sure she doesn't mean half the stuff she says. Maybe you're overreacting." Overreacting. The word hit me like a slap, and I felt a surge of anger mixed with disappointment. Overreacting? Tom, she threatened me. She said she'd take the house whether I liked it or not. That's not just sharp. That's personal. And I need you to have my back on this. I can't do this alone." He shifted uncomfortably, picking up his beer again as if it were a shield. "Martha, you know I'm not good with this kind of thing. Family drama, arguments. I can't. Why don't you talk to a lawyer or something? Get some advice. I'll support you however I can. But I'm not going to start a fight with Sarah. That's between you two." I felt my throat tighten, tears of frustration burning at the corners of my eyes. I wanted to yell at him, to tell him that supporting me meant more than just offering empty words. It meant standing up for me, showing Sarah that I wasn't alone in this. But I could see it in his face. He'd already checked out. He wasn't going to help, not in the way I needed. And in that moment, the loneliness I'd been feeling since the birthday party deepened into something heavier, something almost suffocating. If I was going to protect the farmhouse, I'd have to do it on my own. The next few days passed in a haze of anxiety. I couldn't focus on anything. Work, chores, even simple conversations with friends. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, half expecting another cryptic message from Sarah. I called Ellen a couple of times, venting my fears and frustrations, and she was as supportive as ever, even offering to come with me if I had to face Sarah again. "I've got your back, Martha," she'd said over the phone, her voice firm. "If she tries anything, I'll be there. Just say the word." Her words were a comfort, but I knew this wasn't her fight. It was mine. And deep down, I didn't want to drag anyone else into the mess Sarah and I had created. It was on the 4th day after our confrontation at the farmhouse that Sarah made her next move. I was at home, trying to distract myself by baking, a habit I'd picked up from Mom whenever life got too heavy, when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on my apron, my heart already racing as I approached the door. I had a bad feeling, a gut instinct that told me this wasn't a friendly visit. When I opened the door, there she was, Sarah, standing on my porch with a manila envelope in her hand, and that same cold smirk on her face. Behind her stood a man I didn't recognize, dressed in a cheap suit with a briefcase in hand. He looked like a lawyer, or at least someone trying to pass as one, and my stomach dropped. "Afternoon, sis," Sarah said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Mind if we come in? We've got some business to discuss." I didn't move, my hand still on the doorknob blocking their way. "What kind of business, Sarah? And who's this?" She gestured to the man beside her, her smirk widening. "This is Mr. Hargrove. He's been helping me with a little project. Let's just say he's an expert in property disputes. Now, are you going to invite us in, or do we have to do this out here where the neighbors can hear?" My mind raced, but I stepped aside, letting them in. I didn't want a scene. Not yet. As they walked into the living room, I noticed how Sarah carried herself with an air of triumph, like she'd already won. Mr. Hargrove, meanwhile, kept his expression neutral, setting his briefcase down on the coffee table with a deliberate thud. I stayed standing, arms crossed, refusing to sit and give them any sense of control. "All right, Sarah," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "What's this about? What's in the envelope?" She didn't answer right away, instead, taking her time to sit down on the couch, crossing her legs like she owned the place. Then she held up the envelope, tapping it lightly against her palm. "This, Martha, is the future. I've had enough of your stubbornness, so I've taken matters into my own hands. Inside here is a contract, drawn up by Mr. Hargrove, of course, that transfers your share of the farmhouse to me. All it needs is your signature, and we can put this whole messy situation behind us. You get a cut of the sale, I get the house to do with as I please, and we both move on. Simple." I stared at her, the blood draining from my face. A contract? Transferring my share? The audacity of it, the sheer entitlement, hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just a suggestion or a threat anymore. This was a calculated move, a final demand that left no room for negotiation. She wasn't just asking me to sell the house. She was trying to force me to give up my claim to it entirely, to erase my connection to our family's legacy with the stroke of a pen. "You can't be serious," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of shock and fury. "You think I'm just going to sign away Mom and Dad's house, my house, because you've got some shady lawyer and a piece of paper? This isn't a game, Sarah. This is our history, our memories. I'm not signing anything." Her smirk didn't waver, but her eyes hardened, a glint of irritation flashing through them. "Oh, come on, Martha. Don't be so dramatic. This house isn't doing you any good just sitting there rotting away. I've got plans for it, real plans." A developer's already interested, and the payout would be huge. You'd get your share, enough to do whatever you want. But if you keep clinging to the past like some sad little martyr, you're going to lose everything. Sign the contract, or I'll make sure you don't have a choice. Mr. Hargrove here has already started looking into legal loopholes. Trust me, you don't want to go down that road. I felt my chest tighten, my hands shaking as I fought to keep control. This was it, the ultimate betrayal. My own sister, sitting in my home, threatening to strip away the one thing I cherished most, not because she needed it, but because she wanted to win, because she wanted to hurt me. I glanced at Mr. Hargrove, who was watching the exchange with a detached curiosity, as if he'd seen this kind of family drama play out 100 times before. I wondered how much Sarah had paid him, or what she'd promised him, to get him on her side. But it didn't matter. None of it mattered. I wasn't going to let her bully me into submission. "No," I said, my voice low but firm, the word carrying more weight than I'd expected. "I'm not signing anything, Sarah. Not now. Not ever. That house is mine to protect, just as much as it was Mom and Dad's. You don't get to waltz in here with your threats and your hired help and take it from me. You're not just asking for a piece of property. You're trying to erase everything we've ever been as a family. And I won't let you. So take your contract and your lawyer and get out of my house." For a moment, there was silence, the air between us crackling with tension. Sarah's smirk finally faltered, replaced by a look of genuine surprise. She hadn't expected me to push back so hard, to stand my ground with such conviction. I could see the wheels turning in her head, recalculating her next move. "Mr." Hargrove shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat as if to remind us of his presence. But Sarah ignored him, leaning forward, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You're making a big mistake, Martha," she said, her tone icy. "I gave you a chance to do this the easy way, but if you want to fight, you've got one. I'm not backing down. That house will be mine one way or another, and when I'm done, you'll wish you just signed the damn paper." I didn't flinch, didn't look away, even as her words sent a chill down my spine. "Then bring it on, Sarah," I shot back, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "But know this, I'll fight you with everything I've got. You're not just betraying me, you're betraying Mom and Dad, everything they stood for. And I'm not going to let you tarnish their memory for some quick cash or petty revenge. Get out. Now." She stood up slowly, her movements deliberate, as if to show she wasn't rattled. Mr. Hargrove followed suit, gathering his briefcase with a muttered apology about needing to review some documents. Sarah didn't say another word, just gave me one last lingering look, a mix of anger and something else, something I couldn't quite place, before turning and walking out, the lawyer trailing behind her. The door clicked shut, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, collapsing onto the couch as the adrenaline drained from my body. But the relief was short-lived. I knew this wasn't the end. Sarah had made her intentions clear, and she wasn't the type to give up easily. If anything, my refusal had only made her more determined. I needed to be ready for whatever came next. Legal battles, more threats, maybe even something worse. I couldn't shake the image of her smirk, the way she'd spoken with such certainty, as if she already had a plan B waiting in the wings. And that scared me more than I wanted to admit. I thought about calling Tom upstairs, telling him what had just happened. But I stopped myself. What was the point? He'd made it clear he wasn't going to get involved, and I couldn't keep hoping he'd change. Instead, I called Ellen, my fingers trembling as I dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring, her voice warm and concerned. "Martha? What's wrong? You sound shaken." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself as I recounted the confrontation with Sarah. "She came to my house, Ellen, with some lawyer. She had a contract, wanted me to sign over my share of the farmhouse. She threatened me, said if I didn't agree, she'd find a way to take it. I told her no, but I don't know what she's going to do next. I'm scared." Ellen was silent for a moment, then let out a low whistle. "Damn, Martha. That's next level. She's not playing around. But you did the right thing, standing your ground. That house means too much to you, to all of us who knew your folks. You can't let her win this. What do you need from me? I can come over, help you figure out your next steps." I felt a wave of gratitude for her, but I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. "Thanks, Ellen, but I think I need to handle this on my own for now. I needed to hear a friendly voice. I'll look into getting a lawyer of my own, someone who can protect my rights to the house. But if things get worse, I'll let you know. I promise." "All right," she said, though I could hear the worry in her tone. "But don't hesitate to call me, okay? Day or night, I've got your back." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the spot on the coffee table where Mr. Hargrove's briefcase had been. My mind kept circling back to Sarah's words, her cold determination. I knew I'd crossed a line by refusing her, by standing up to her so directly. But I also knew I'd had no choice. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about principle, about protecting the memory of our parents and the love they'd poured into that place. It was about showing Sarah that I wasn't the pushover she thought I was. That night, I barely slept, my dreams haunted by images of the farmhouse being torn down, of Sarah standing over the rubble with that smug look on her face. When I woke up, bleary-eyed and exhausted, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for her next move. I was going to take action, to protect what was mine before she could strike again. I spent the morning researching local lawyers, looking for someone with experience in inheritance and property disputes. By midday, I'd made an appointment with a woman named Linda Carter, who came highly recommended for her no-nonsense approach. She agreed to meet with me the next day, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I wasn't as powerless as Sarah thought, but even as I prepared to fight, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. Sarah had shown her true colors, and I knew she wouldn't stop until she got what she wanted, or until I stopped her. As I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and staring at the phone, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just fear or anger anymore. It was resolve. I'd spent too long trying to keep the peace, hoping Sarah would come around, hoping Tom would step up. But those days were over. If she wanted a war, she'd get one. And I'd be damned if I let her take the one thing that mattered most to me. The farmhouse wasn't just a piece of property. It was my heart, my history, my family. And I'd fight for it with everything I had, no matter the cost. Sarah might have started this conflict, but I was going to finish it. One way or another, I'd make sure she understood that some things, some bonds, some memories, were worth more than money could ever buy. The morning after my decision to fight back, I sat at the kitchen table, my coffee growing cold as I scrolled through pages of legal resources on my laptop. My resolve from the night before hadn't wavered, but the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on me like a physical force. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my past, for the memory of my parents, for the very idea of family that I'd clung to despite everything. Sarah had crossed a line, and I knew she wouldn't stop until she got what she wanted, or until I stopped her. The appointment with Linda Carter, the lawyer I'd found, was set for later that day, and I spent every moment leading up to it preparing. I gathered every document I could find related to the farmhouse, deeds, inheritance papers, even old letters from Mom and Dad that mentioned their wishes for the property. I wasn't sure what would be useful, but I wanted to be ready for anything. When I walked into Linda's office, a small but tidy space in downtown Columbus, I felt a flicker of hope mixed with nervous energy. Linda was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, her desk stacked with legal books and case files. She greeted me with a firm handshake and gestured for me to sit, her expression unreadable as I poured out my story. I told her everything. Sarah's cruel jabs at the birthday party, her obsession with the farmhouse, the confrontation with the contract and the shady lawyer, Mr. Hargrove. I laid out the documents I'd brought, my hands trembling slightly as I explained how much the house meant to me, how it wasn't just property but a piece of my soul. Linda listened intently, taking notes and asking pointed questions about the inheritance, the ownership structure, and any communication I'd had with Sarah about the property over the years. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her notepad. "Martha," she said, her voice steady but not unkind, "I'm going to be straight with you. This isn't going to be easy. From what you've told me, Sarah seems determined, and if she's already hired someone to draft a contract, she's likely prepared to push this into a legal battle. But here's the good news. Based on the documents you've shown me, your claim to the farmhouse is strong. Your parents left it to you explicitly in their will, with no mention of joint ownership or provisions for Sarah. That gives us a solid foundation. However, inheritance disputes can get messy, especially when emotions are involved. She might try to claim undue influence, or argue that the property should be split as part of a broader estate settlement. We need to be proactive." I nodded, my throat tight. "What do we do?" "I can't let her take it, Linda. I just can't." She gave me a small, reassuring smile. "We start by securing your position. First, I'll file a formal declaration of ownership with the county clerk to reinforce your legal title to the property. That'll make it harder for Sarah to challenge your claim without substantial evidence. Next, I'll draft a cease and desist letter to her and this Mr. Hargrove, warning them against any further attempts to coerce you into signing over your share. If they've already started pursuing legal action, we'll counter with a motion to dismiss based on the clear terms of the will. And finally, I want to dig into Sarah's plans for the property. If she's working with a developer, as she mentioned, there might be a paper trail, contracts, emails, anything that shows intent to profit off a forced sale. If we can prove she's acting in bad faith, it'll weaken her position significantly." I felt a surge of relief at her confidence, though the road ahead still seemed daunting. "How long will this take? And how much will it cost? I don't have a lot of savings, but I'll do whatever it takes." Linda's expression softened. I understand, Martha. Legal battles can be expensive, but I'll work with you on a payment plan if needed. As for time, it depends on how far Sarah wants to push this. If she backs off after the cease and desist, we might resolve it in a matter of weeks. If she escalates to court, it could take months. But I promise you I'll fight for you. I've handled cases like this before, and I don't back down from bullies. Her words gave me strength, and for the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't entirely alone in this fight. I left her office with a plan in place and a renewed sense of purpose. Linda would handle the legal side, but I knew I needed to do my part too. I couldn't just sit back and wait for Sarah's next move. I had to be strategic, to think ahead. That night, I called Ellen and updated her on the meeting with Linda, grateful for her unwavering support. "You're doing the right thing, Martha," she said over the phone. "Sarah needs to know she can't just steamroll over you. Keep me in the loop, okay? If you need me to testify or help with anything, I'm there." Over the next week, I threw myself into protecting the farmhouse in every way I could. Linda filed the declaration of ownership and sent the cease and desist letter, and I spent hours combing through old family records, looking for anything that might bolster my case. I even drove out to the farmhouse a few times, taking photos of the property to document its condition and my ongoing care for it. I wasn't sure if those would be useful in court, but I wanted every piece of evidence I could get. During one of those visits, I found an old box of letters in the attic, written between Mom and Dad during their early years of marriage. One of them, dated just a few years before I was born, mentioned their dream of leaving the farmhouse to their children as a place of family unity. It wasn't legally binding, but it was a powerful reminder of their intent, and I tucked it away to show Linda. Meanwhile, Sarah stayed silent. No texts, no surprise visits, no word from Mr. Hargrove. At first I thought the cease and desist might have scared her off, but I knew better than to underestimate her. The silence felt like the calm before the storm, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was planning something bigger. Linda agreed, warning me to stay vigilant. "People like Sarah don't back down easily," she said during one of our follow-up calls. "She's probably regrouping, looking for another angle. Keep your eyes open, and don't engage with her directly if she reaches out. Let me handle any communication." As the days turned into weeks, the constant tension began to wear on me. I wasn't sleeping well. My dreams filled with images of the farmhouse being sold off or torn down. I found myself withdrawing, canceling plans with friends and avoiding family gatherings where I might run into Sarah or her allies. Even Tom noticed my change in demeanor, though his attempts to help were as half-hearted as ever. "You're stressing yourself out too much, hun," he said one evening over dinner, his tone casual as he speared a piece of chicken. "Maybe you should just let the lawyers handle it and try to relax." I didn't bother responding. Relaxing wasn't an option when my entire world felt like it was under siege. It was during this period of waiting that I decided to take a step back, to gain some perspective. I couldn't keep living in a state of constant anxiety, jumping at every shadow. On a whim, I booked a weekend getaway to a small cabin in Hocking Hills, a few hours' drive from home. I told myself it was just to clear my head, to recharge before the next round of battle. But deep down, I knew I needed to reconnect with something bigger than the fight. Something that reminded me why I was fighting in the first place. Ellen offered to come with me, but I declined, needing the solitude. "I'll be fine," I told her. "I just need a few days to think. I'll call you if anything comes up." The cabin was rustic, nestled among towering trees and overlooking a quiet stream. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I spent the first day hiking, letting the rhythm of my steps and the sound of birdsong drown out the noise in my head. As I sat by the stream that evening, watching the water ripple over smooth stones, I thought about Mom and Dad, about the values they'd instilled in me. Kindness, perseverance, the importance of family. I'd always believed in those things, even when Sarah's bitterness tried to tear them apart. But now, I realized that fighting for the farmhouse wasn't just about holding on to the past. It was about honoring their legacy by standing up for what was right. That realization gave me a renewed sense of clarity. a quiet strength I hadn't felt in a long time. While I was away, Sarah made her next move, though I didn't find out until I returned. According to Linda, who left me a voicemail on Sunday evening, Sarah had filed a formal petition with the county court, claiming that the farmhouse should be considered part of a shared estate and sold, with the profits split between us. She'd even submitted a supposed agreement from years ago, a handwritten note she claimed we'd both signed as teenagers, promising to share any inherited property. Linda was skeptical of its authenticity, calling it a desperate and likely fabricated attempt to muddy the waters, but it showed just how far Sarah was willing to go. She was digging in her heels, banking on the hope that I'd crumble under the pressure of a drawn-out legal battle. Her desperation was evident, but it also revealed her true character. Someone who'd stooped to lies and manipulation to get what she wanted. When I got back from the cabin, I met with Linda immediately to discuss our response. She'd already started drafting a motion to dismiss Sarah's petition, citing the clear terms of the will and the lack of verifiable evidence for her claims. But the real breakthrough came a few days later, when Linda's investigator, a private contact she often worked with on property cases, uncovered something damning. Sarah had indeed been in talks with a local developer, a company known for buying up rural properties and turning them into commercial lots. The investigator managed to obtain email correspondence between Sarah and a representative from the company, dated weeks before her first mention of selling the farmhouse. In the emails, Sarah promised to deliver full ownership of the property by a specific date, in exchange for a hefty personal commission on top of the sale price. It was clear evidence of bad faith. She wasn't just looking to split profits. She was planning to profit personally at my expense, without regard for our family's history or my rights. Linda was thrilled with the find, calling it a game changer. "This shows intent to defraud, Martha," she explained during our meeting, her voice brimming with confidence. "She's not acting as a co-heir with a legitimate claim. She's acting as a profiteer, trying to manipulate the situation for personal gain." Combined with the questionable agreement she submitted, this paints a picture of deceit. I'm going to file these emails as evidence and request an emergency hearing to have her petition thrown out. If the judge sees this, it could end her case before it even gets off the ground. And if she persists, we can countersue for damages, emotional distress, legal fees, the works. I felt a surge of vindication, but also a deep sadness. This wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about seeing my sister for who she'd become. The emails laid bare her greed, her willingness to betray everything we'd once shared for a payout. But I couldn't dwell on the hurt. I had to focus on the fight. Linda prepared the necessary paperwork, and within a week, we had a court date set for the emergency hearing. The night before, I sat at the kitchen table, going over my statement with Linda's guidance, my nerves a tangled knot in my stomach. Tom, as usual, stayed out of it, retreating to the basement with his headphones on, as if the outcome of this hearing didn't affect him at all. I didn't even try to talk to him about it. I'd long since accepted that I was in this alone, save for Ellen's moral support and Linda's legal expertise. The day of the hearing arrived, a gray, overcast morning that matched my mood. I dressed in a simple navy blazer and slacks, wanting to look composed even if I felt like a wreck inside. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, a sterile space with wooden benches and a judge's dais that loomed over the room. Sarah was already there when I arrived, seated with Mr. Hargrove at a table across from ours. She didn't look at me, her face a mask of cool determination, but I could feel the tension radiating from her. Mr. Hargrove, meanwhile, seemed less confident than before, shuffling through papers with a furrowed brow. I wondered if he'd seen the evidence Linda had submitted, if he knew how weak their position had become. The hearing began with formalities, the judge, a stern older man with wire-rimmed glasses, calling the case and outlining the purpose of the session. Linda presented our side first, methodically laying out the terms of the will, the declaration of ownership, and the lack of legal basis for Sarah's claim. Then came the bombshell. She introduced the emails, reading excerpts aloud that detailed Sarah's negotiations with the developer and her promise of a personal commission. The courtroom was silent as she spoke, the weight of the evidence undeniable. I stole a glance at Sarah, whose composed facade had cracked, her jaw tight, and her eyes darting to Mr. Hargrove as if looking for a way out. When it was Sarah's turn to respond, Mr. Hargrove stumbled through a weak defense, arguing that the emails were taken out of context and that the handwritten agreement proved a shared intent for the property. But the judge wasn't buying it. He interrupted at one point, his tone sharp, to question the authenticity of the agreement, noting that it lacked any notarization or corroborating evidence from the time it was supposedly written. By the end of the hearing, it was clear which way the wind was blowing. After a brief recess, the judge returned with his ruling. Sarah's petition was dismissed with prejudice, meaning she couldn't refile the same claim. He also issued a formal order affirming my sole ownership of the farmhouse, citing the clear intent of my parents' will and the evidence of Sarah's bad faith. As a final blow, he warned her against further harassment or attempts to coerce me, stating that any future actions could result in legal consequences for her and her counsel. I sat there, stunned, as the gavel fell. It was over. I'd won. Linda reached over, squeezing my hand with a triumphant smile. "We did it, Martha," she whispered. "The house is yours, legally and indisputably." Across the room, Sarah stood abruptly, her face a storm of anger and humiliation. She didn't look at me, just gathered her things and stormed out, Mr. Hargrove trailing behind her like a scolded child. I watched her go, a mix of relief and sorrow washing over me. I'd protected the farmhouse, but at what cost? My relationship with my sister, already fractured, was now shattered beyond repair. In the days that followed, the reality of my victory sank in. The farmhouse was safe, its title secured by a court order that Sarah couldn't challenge without risking severe penalties. Linda advised me to consider a restraining order if Sarah attempted contact again, but for now, she seemed to have retreated. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she'd left town for a while, supposedly to clear her head, though I doubted that was the whole story. Her absence gave me space to breathe, to start rebuilding the pieces of my life that had been consumed by this fight. Something unexpected happened during this time. Tom, who'd been so distant throughout the ordeal, came to me one evening with a look of quiet shame on his face. We were in the living room, the TV droning in the background, when he turned to me and said, "Martha, I owe you an apology. I should have been there for you, with Sarah and all this mess. I didn't realize how much it was hurting you. Or maybe I did, and just didn't want to deal with it. I was wrong to stay out of it. I'm sorry." His words caught me off guard, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell him it was too little, too late, but another part saw the genuine regret in his eyes. I nodded slowly, my voice soft. "Thank you for saying that, Tom. I needed you, and it hurt that you weren't there, but I appreciate you owning up to it. Maybe we can work on being a team from here." It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start, a small step toward mending what had been broken between us. With the legal battle behind me, I felt a pull to return to the farmhouse, not just to check on it, but to reclaim it as the sanctuary it had always been. On a sunny Saturday morning, I drove out there alone, the court order tucked safely in my bag as a tangible reminder of my victory. When I pulled up to the house, I sat in the car for a moment, taking in the familiar sight of the peeling paint and sagging porch. It looked weary, just as I felt, but it was still standing, still mine. I spent the day cleaning, not out of necessity, but as a ritual, a way to wash away the bitterness of the past months. I swept the floors, dusted the furniture, and opened every window to let the fresh air in. In the backyard, I tackled the overgrown garden, pulling weeds and trimming back the wild growth until the outline of Mom's old flower beds began to emerge. As I worked, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, a quiet catharsis in the act of restoring something I loved. I could almost hear Mom's laughter, Dad's gruff encouragement, as if their spirits were there with me, cheering me on. By the time the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the fields, I sat on the porch with a glass of iced tea, my hands dirty, but my heart lighter than it had been in ages. The farmhouse wasn't just a building anymore. It was a symbol of my strength, of my refusal to let go of what mattered most. As I sat there, I thought about Sarah, about the pain and resentment that had driven her to this point. I didn't know if we'd ever speak again, if there was any chance of salvaging what we'd once had. Part of me mourned the sister I'd lost, but another part knew I'd done what I had to do. I'd fought for justice, not just for myself, but for the memory of our parents. And in doing so, I'd found a strength I hadn't known I possessed. The farmhouse was safe, and so was I. And so, as the stars began to peek through the twilight sky, I made a silent promise to Mom and Dad, to myself, to never let anyone take this place from me again. This was my home, my history, my heart, and I'd protect it, no matter what. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of the battles we sometimes face within our own families, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hit that like button if you felt the weight of this journey, and drop a comment below. Have you ever had to stand up to someone you loved to protect something dear to you? Where do you draw the line when family turns against family? Share your stories. I'm reading every one. And if you want to see more stories of resilience and justice, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.